Right, this is gender, the topic of gender in AQA Psychology. In this video we're going to look just at these first two parts of this bullet point. Sex and gender and sex role stereotypes is what this video is about. So the first question is really, what's the difference between sex and gender? Because many people use the two terms to basically mean the same thing. The key difference is that our sex is a biological fact, so whether we are genetically male or female, we have our last pair of chromosomes determines this, either XX for a female or XY for a male, and those create hormonal differences in our bodies. Gender, on the other hand, is more like our sense of whether we're male or female, so it's a psychological construct or a social construct, basically roles and attitudes and behaviours that we associate with being male or female, our sense of whether we're female or male, and that is how gender dysphoria develops, when someone's sense of maleness or femaleness, their gender, is out of step with their biological sex. Now, sex role stereotypes. These are expectations or stereotypes within a society about what's acceptable or normal behaviour for males and females. I'm sure you can think of many, many examples. Girls like shopping, men like curry, etc., etc. We learn these stereotypes right from the time we're born, both implicitly and explicitly. So implicitly, we're not told sometimes about these stereotypes, but we can learn about them by modelling behaviour of people from the same sex. Equally explicitly, we are told things about our gender by our parents or other individuals. So both we learn these stereotypes both implicitly by watching other people and copying, and explicitly when we're told these things. Some sex role stereotypes might have a grain of truth in them. We're going to look at a couple of those in a minute, but most of them don't. Actually, differences within a sex are greater than differences between the sex, as far as we know so far. Mostly these sex role stereotypes develop through socialization. Think about the impact of social learning, the influence of our culture and media. So we're always undergoing the process of social learning, copying and other models around us, and that is partly how we develop our sex role stereotypes. Right, this is the first piece of research that we're looking at, and this was a recent study using MRI scans. This was done in 2014, and they've produced these called connectome maps, and they managed to show actually that there are differences between male and female brains in the way that they process information. So if you look at the right here, the female brain, you can see the way the different connections are going from side to side, which could account for the ability to multitask in women, because they're more able to communicate between the two hemispheres of their brain. Whereas you can see on the left hand side, the male brain, the connections are running more within the different hemispheres. They're going between the front and back of it. You can see the general direction of the connections there. So that could, as it says, explain why men have better spatial or motor skills than women. So that's this is kind of an evaluation point, really, that we're saying that some sex role stereotypes actually do have that grain of truth within them. And this is one example. Another example is navigation. As you know, the stereotype is that men are much better at navigating than women. And actually, that's been backed up by research. Pinsker, 2016, actually gave a dose of testosterone to women and found that their navigation improved by changing the way that their brain navigated. So they could see more activation in a particular part of the temporal lobe. And as we know, testosterone is present in much higher quantities in males than females. So that's another sex role stereotype that's been that does have a grain of truth within it. still doesn't necessarily hold for everyone, but it says that potentially the presence of high levels of testosterone could lead to the brain operating in a different way and therefore better navigation skills. Okay, let's go on to disadvantages of sex role stereotypes. So there's lots of disadvantages here. Many of them are not based on any evidence whatsoever. And this can lead to wrong assumptions and behaviours, assuming, for example, that women won't do well as an executive of a company because they're emotional or something like that. There's lots of wrong assumptions that can be made. Equally, cognitive bias. People make judgments based on gender, based on their view, their stereotypes that they have about the different genders, that can be really damaging. It can really lead to an exaggeration of the differences between men and women, and as I said before, actually differences within each sex are greater than differences between the sexes as far as we've found in research so far. So actually having these sex role stereotypes is both inaccurate and misleading and unhelpful, and just plain wrong. It also creates pressure to conform to sex role stereotypes. So for example, a boy may be bullied because he's not acting masculine enough or something. Right, then if we look at some research, there's really two key studies here about sex role stereotypes to be aware of. The first one, Condry and Condry, adults had to watch babies playing with toys and they had to identify the baby's reaction. So it was the same video, but they're told in one video that it's a boy, and in the other video that a different participant will be told it's a girl, and then they give different answers about the baby's reaction, based on whether they've been told it's a boy or whether they've been told it's a girl. So for example, when they're told that the baby is a boy, they might identify the baby crying as being angry, rather than when they're told it's a girl, the same video of the baby crying, they might say it's upset, or something. You know, you get the idea. So it's the same video, but the baby, they're either told it's a boy or a girl, and that really affects their judgment of what the baby is doing and their interpretation of the baby's feelings. So that's one really key study, and there are more details of that in your booklet. Another study, this one actually isn't in your booklet, and I'll upload the information about it. But the basic idea here was they had a 10-minute observation. They dressed the baby as a boy or a girl and got a mother to play with it for 10 minutes, with like a selection of different toys, some traditionally masculine, some feminine, like the soft toys versus the cars, or well, I don't think it was cars, but I'll upload the information for you to have a look at. But again, the basic idea here was that the baby was treated differently according to their gender. When they were a boy, they were encouraged more to do those motor skills, to do more big movements, whereas when they were a girl, they were more encouraged to play with what were perceived as the feminine toys, the soft toys, and so on. So that's another really interesting study, and again we'll watch probably a video of a similar study in the lesson so you can see how that worked. So that's why I've added that one in. Right, advantages of research into sex role stereotypes. Actually, although sex role stereotypes are a really negative thing, it's really important that we study them, because if we understand them, then we can challenge them more effectively. So, for example, if sex role stereotypes are coming from the media, we can change, or at least campaign to change the way that those stereotypes are being communicated through the media, and therefore reduce them. Equally, if sex role stereotypes are mainly coming from parents, then parents can be educated about avoiding to teach their children about these things, by changing their behaviours in certain ways. So although sex role stereotypes are a really negative thing, it's really important that we research them so that we can understand them better. So that's another evaluation point to make.